They thought stripping my last name and throwing me out of the manor in a freezing snowstorm would force me to my knees. My parents believed their power was absolute, but they forgot the man who built this empire never trusted them. He trusted me. When the bank manager swiped that scratched silver card, the screen didn't just show wealth. It showed $1.2 billion and a death sentence for their greed. My name is Valerie Thorne, and at 32 years old, I had spent my entire life appraising the value of beautiful things, never suspecting that my own value to my parents was measured solely in zeros on a balance sheet. The drive to Thorne Manor was a suicide mission for my tires. The tires of my modest sedan struggling against the torrential Seattle downpour that battered the windshield. I had received the summons an hour ago, a curt text from my father that felt less like an invitation and more like a subpoena. I stepped into the foyer, shaking the rain from my coat. The house smelled of lemon polish and old money, a scent that used to comfort me but now just made my stomach turn. In the dining room, beneath the crystal chandelier that cost more than my college tuition, sat my parents, Julian and Sylvia. They were not eating. On the mahogany table lay a large object draped in velvet and a thick legal dossier. "You are late," Julian said, checking his watch. He did not offer me a seat. "We do not have time for pleasantries. The auction house is bleeding cash. Valerie, we need a liquidity injection immediately." He whipped the velvet cover off the easel. My breath hitched, but not for the reason he hoped. It was a landscape, stylistically similar to the Hudson River School, purported to be a lost masterpiece from the 19th century. "We need your signature on the certificate of authenticity," Sylvia said, sliding the dossier toward me. Her manicured nail tapped the paper. "With your appraisal, the bank will release a loan of $50 million by tomorrow morning." I walked closer, pulling a loop from my pocket. I did not need to look for long. I knew this painting. I had warned them about this specific forgery 3 months ago when it surfaced in a private sale in Geneva. The brushstrokes in the lower quadrant were too hesitant. The pigment aging artificial. "I cannot sign this," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "It is a fake. Father, it is the same forgery I warned you about. If I authenticate this, it is fraud. You will sign it because you are a thorn." Julian slammed his hand on the table, the sound echoing off the cold walls. "We paid for your degree. We paid for your apartment. You owe us this. I won't do it." I stepped back, clutching the loop like a shield. "I have built a reputation on my integrity. I will not go to prison for your bad investments." Sylvia stood up, her face twisting into a mask of ugly rage that cracked her elegant facade. "Integrity. You are a parasite. Valerie, an ungrateful little leech. If you walk out of here without signing, I will make sure you never work in this industry again. I will bury you." "Do it," I whispered, finding a spine I didn't know I had. "Bury me. It is better than being a criminal." Julian looked at me with eyes devoid of any paternal warmth. It was the look one gave a broken appliance. "Then you are no longer my daughter. Get out. You are dead to us." Before I could process the words, he was marching me to the door. He shoved me hard, sending me stumbling onto the wet stone of the porch. My old suitcase, which I had left in the hallway, came flying after me, skidding across the slick surface. "And do not bother coming back when you are starving," Julian shouted. The heavy oak door slammed shut. The sound was final, like a gunshot execution of my past. I stood there, rain soaking through my blouse instantly, shivering violently. I reached for my phone to call my best friend, but the screen displayed a terrifying message: "Service suspended." Panic, cold and sharp, pierced my chest. I opened my banking app. Account locked. Contact administrator. They had not just kicked me out. They had erased me. They had planned this down to the minute, anticipating my refusal. I was stranded in the dark, miles from the city, with no money and no name. I fell to my knees, opening my purse with trembling hands to see if I had any cash. My fingers brushed against something cold and metal in the hidden lining of my wallet. I pulled it out. It was the silver card Grandpa Arthur had slipped into my hand 2 days before he died. It had no numbers, just the embossed name of a bank I had never heard of. "When you have nowhere left to go," I whispered his words into the storm, clutching the silver rectangle to my chest. It was the only thing I had left. The leather of the back seat was unforgiving, sucking the warmth from my body as I tried to curl into a ball. I had parked in a 24-hour public garage downtown, terrified that if I stayed on the street, a police officer would tap on my window and ask questions I could not answer. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the slam of the manor door and saw the look of absolute disgust on my father's face. In the cold silence, my mind drifted to Grandpa Arthur. He was the anomaly in the Thorne bloodline, a man who built the fortune with his hands rather than inheriting it with a sneer. He hated the pretension my parents bathed in. I remembered sitting by his hospital bed 2 years ago, the smell of antiseptic failing to mask the scent of his old tobacco pipe. "Valerie," he had whispered, gripping my hand with surprising strength. "They love the shine, but they forget the steel underneath. Never let them turn you into glass." I woke up at 6 in the morning with a neck so stiff I could barely turn my head. The storm had passed, leaving behind a gray, miserable drizzle. I counted the cash in my wallet. I had exactly $42.15. It was a pathetic sum for a woman who, just 24 hours ago, had been handling art worth millions. I found a small diner nearby and bought a black coffee, wrapping my hands around the paper cup just to feel something warm. I tapped the screen of my phone, praying for a miracle. Instead, a notification from my work email popped up. The subject line was succinct termination of contract. My stomach dropped. I opened it, my eyes scanning the legal jargon. Due to an unforeseen conflict of interest reported by major stakeholders, your position is terminated effective immediately. They did not just lock the door, I muttered to myself, staring at the screen until the words blurred. They burned the bridge. My mother had made the call. I knew it. She was ensuring I had zero leverage, zero income, and zero reputation. They wanted me destitute. They wanted me to come crawling back to the manor, begging to sign their fraudulent certificate just so I could eat. The cruelty of it took my breath away. It was tactical warfare against their own child. Panic began to rise in my throat, hot and choking. I needed a plan, but I had nothing. Then, I remembered the weight in my pocket. I pulled out the silver card. In the daylight, it looked even more archaic. There was no magnetic strip, no chip, no 16-digit number. Just the name Sovereign Keystone Trust and a code engraved in the bottom right corner. Grandpa's voice echoed in my memory, clear as a bell. "When you have nowhere left to go and no one to trust, take this there. Do not go before you are ready. Valerie." It is a heavy key. I typed the bank's name into my map app. It did not direct me to the main commercial strips where the flashy banks with neon signs lived. Instead, it pointed to the heart of the old financial district, a maze of one-way streets and pre-war architecture. I drove there in a daze. The building was a fortress of gray stone, squeezed between 2 modern glass skyscrapers like a stubborn memory. It had no ATM lobby, no posters advertising low-interest mortgages, and no welcoming automatic doors. It looked like a mausoleum for money. I parked the car and checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. My blouse was wrinkled, my hair was a mess, and there were dark circles under my eyes. I looked like a woman on the edge of a breakdown. "I have nothing else to lose," I said aloud, my voice sounding thin in the confines of the car. "Grandpa, please do not let this be a dead end." I stepped out onto the wet pavement. The building loomed over me, imposing and silent. I gripped the silver card so hard its edges dug into my palm. This was it. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the damp city air, and pushed against the heavy brass handles of the entrance. The silence inside the bank was absolute. As the heavy brass doors clicked shut behind me, the noise of the city vanished, replaced by the hum of expensive air conditioning and the soft echo of footsteps on marble floors. It felt less like a financial institution and more like a cathedral. There were no lines, no velvet ropes, just a single polished mahogany counter manned by a woman in an impeccable navy suit. I walked toward her, acutely aware of the squeak my wet sneakers made on the pristine floor. The teller looked up. Her eyes flicked over my wrinkled blouse and my messy hair. I saw the flash of judgment, the slight tightening of her jaw, but she smoothed her expression into a professional mask. "May I help you, Miss?" she asked, her tone polite but guarded. I placed the silver card on the counter. It looked absurd against the glossy wood, scratched and dull, like a piece of scrap metal. I am not sure if this is active," I said, my voice feeling small in the cavernous room. "My grandfather left it to me." "Could you check?" The teller hesitated, picking up the card with 2 fingers as if it were contaminated. She slid it into a slot on her terminal that I had not noticed before. "I will see what the system says, but without a chip." She trailed off. Suddenly, a sharp, piercing chime echoed through the lobby. The monitor in front of her did not display a menu. Instead, the screen turned a violent, flashing red. The teller gasped, pulling her hands back as if the keyboard had burned her. "I didn't do anything," she stammered, looking terrified. "It's a code black. I have never seen a code black." Before I could ask what that meant, the door to the office behind the counter flew open. A man with silver hair and a bespoke suit rushed out, adjusting his glasses frantically. This was Mr. Vance, the branch manager. I recognized him from the few times he had visited the manor years ago, though he had always been ignored by my parents. "Who swiped that card?" he demanded, his voice echoing. The teller pointed a shaking finger at me. "She did, sir." The system locked down instantly. "Mr. Vance turned to me, his face flushed with alarm. Then, his eyes landed on the silver card sitting on the counter. The color drained from his face. He looked at me, really looked at me, and the panic in his eyes dissolved into an expression of profound awe. "Miss Thorne," he whispered. "Yes," I said. He rounded the counter, moving with an urgency that belied his age. "Please, come with me immediately. We cannot discuss this out here." He ushered me into a private office that smelled of leather and cedar. He closed the blinds and locked the door. My heart was pounding against my ribs. I thought I was in trouble. I thought the card was stolen or flagged for fraud. Mr. Vance sat behind his desk and gestured for me to place my hand on a glass panel embedded in the wood. "I need to verify your identity," he said, his hands trembling slightly as he typed a command. "Your grandfather set this biometric lock 15 years ago. He said you would come one day." I placed my palm on the glass. A beam of blue light scanned my hand. A moment later, the computer gave a soft, confirming beep. "Identity confirmed Valerie Thorne. Primary beneficiary," the automated voice announced. "Mr. Vance let out a long breath he seemed to have been holding for years. He turned the monitor around so I could see it. "This is a Legacy Prime account," Mr. Vance said, his voice thick with emotion. "Your grandfather liquidated his personal assets decades ago. He moved them here, into aggressive, high-yield investments that have been compounding untouched for 30 years. Your parents never knew this account existed." I looked at the screen. I blinked, sure that the stress was making me hallucinate. The number was too long. It did not make sense. "Is that millions?" I asked. my throat dry. No. Valerie, Mr. Vance said softly. That is billions. I leaned closer. The balance read $1,242,600,000. The room spun. I grabbed the edge of the desk to steady myself. $1.2 billion. It was enough to buy the auction house my parents were trying to save 10 times over. Why, I managed to ask. Why did he hide this, Mr. Vance looked at me with sad, knowing eyes. Because Arthur knew his son. He knew Julian was weak and greedy. He told me that if Julian ever got his hands on the real fortune, he would destroy the family legacy in a generation. He paused, leaning forward. He left it for you. Mr. Vance continued. He said you were the only one who had his heart. The only one who could be trusted with the power to rebuild or to destroy. The shock of the account balance was still vibrating through my bones when Mr. Vance returned from the vault. He carried a heavy, matte black safety deposit box. He set it down on the desk with a thud that sounded like a judge's gavel. Your grandfather left strict instructions, Mr. Vance said, sliding the box toward me. This was only to be released once the emergency code was activated. He prepared this 18 months before he passed. I opened the lid. Inside lay a single envelope made of thick, cream-colored paper and a rugged, military-grade hard drive. I picked up the letter first. The handwriting was shaky, but unmistakably Arthur's. My dearest Valerie, it read. If you are reading this, they have finally shown you their teeth. I predicted this day would come. Julian and Sylvia love money more than blood. Do not weep for them, and do not use what I have given you for petty revenge. Use it for justice. Clean the house. I wiped a tear from my cheek and plugged the hard drive into Mr. Vance's secure terminal. Folders popped up, organized by year. I clicked on the most recent one. My breath caught in my throat. It was a ledger. A shadow ledger. My God! I whispered, scrolling through the columns. They are not just bad at business. They are criminals. The data was damning. My parents were using the auction house to wash dirty money. They would inflate the value of worthless pieces, sell them to anonymous shell companies they secretly owned, and legitimize illegal funds. And worse, the Thorne family charity account showed massive withdrawals labeled as consulting fees that went straight into my mother's offshore accounts in the Caymans. I need access to funds. Mr. Vance, I said, my voice hardening. I need $50,000 in cash immediately, and I need a limitless credit line set up on a secure card. Consider it done, he replied. An hour later, I was sitting in the plush office of Gideon Blackwood. Gideon was a shark in a suit, the only lawyer in the city who hated my father as much as I now did. He had lost a major case against Thorne Enterprises 10 years ago because my father bribed a witness. You want to hire me? Gideon leaned back, studying me over his glasses. I thought you were Daddy's little girl. I am the woman who is going to burn Daddy's house down, I said, placing a stack of cash on his desk. And I have the matches. I want to sue them. Gideon, but not yet. First, we secure my position. With Gideon on retainer, I moved quickly. I rented a penthouse in a building known for its celebrity-grade security. It was discreet, modern, and impregnable. I bought a new wardrobe, trading my soft pastels for sharp, tailored suits in charcoal and black. I needed to look like a CEO, not an appraiser. My next call was to Sarah and Marcus, two brilliant analysts my parents had fired last year for asking too many questions. I met them in my new living room, the hard drive connected to a large monitor. We go through everything, I told them. Every transaction, every email. 2 days later, Marcus found the golden ticket. Look at this, he said, pointing to a loan agreement. They are desperate. They are trying to mortgage the Thorne Heritage Building. That is the headquarters. It is the symbol of the family. Who is the lender, I asked. It is not a bank. Marcus replied. It is a private lending group. Basically, loan sharks with better suits. The interest rate is predatory. A cold smile touched my lips. The Heritage Building was the heart of the empire. If they lost that, they lost their legitimacy. Gideon, I said, turning to my lawyer, find out who holds that debt. I do not want to stop the loan. I want to buy the debt. I want to be the one holding the leash when they default. That is aggressive, Gideon said, his eyes gleaming with approval. You want to be their creditor? Exactly, I said. And one more thing. Send an anonymous tip to every major bank in the city. Tell them to re-verify the collateral on any loans requested by Julian Thorne. Tell them the assets are fraudulent. I walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, my parents were sipping champagne, thinking they had won. They had no idea that the daughter they discarded was about to become the owner of their debts. They wanted to cut me off, I whispered to the glass. So I will buy the ground they stand on. The invisible noose I had tightened around my parents' financial neck began to chafe within 48 hours. The anonymous tips regarding the fraudulent collateral had done their work. Major banks were not just stalling, they were freezing negotiations. My parents, accustomed to doors opening at the mere whisper of their surname, were now facing a wall of bureaucratic silence. They knew this was not bad luck. They knew it was sabotage. I was sipping tea in my new living room when the intercom buzzed. The concierge informed me that a private investigator had been asking questions about the tenant in the penthouse. My parents had found me. They could not conceive that I had legitimate access to wealth, so their conclusion was predictable. I must have stolen from them before I left. My phone rang. The screen displayed Mother. I pressed the record button on my laptop and answered on speaker. Valerie, darling. Sylvia's voice oozed through the speaker, dripping with a saccharine sweetness that made my skin crawl. We have been so worried about you. Your father. Well, you know how he gets. He is just heartbroken. Cut the performance. Mother, I said, my voice flat. Voice. What do you want? We want you to come home for dinner tonight, she continued, undeterred by my tone. We can put this whole ugly misunderstanding behind us. We are family. After all. You sound tired. Sweetie, are you eating enough? Just come home, and we can fix everything. It was a trap. They wanted me in the house to pressure me, or perhaps to have the police waiting to arrest me for the imaginary theft. I will not be coming to dinner, I replied. And do not contact me again unless it is through my lawyer. Valerie, wait. You ungrateful little. I hung up before she could finish the slur. I saved the recording and emailed it to Gideon. It was evidence of harassment, a small brick in the fortress I was building. But my refusal ignited Julian's rage. If he could not control me, he would destroy me. The next morning, the headlines hit. Thorne heiress inspirals drugs, theft, and a family's heartbreak. Julian had gone to the tabloids. He spun a narrative of a loving father forced to cut off a daughter struggling with severe mental illness and substance abuse. He claimed I had stolen family heirlooms to fund my addiction. By noon, the sidewalk below my building was a sea of paparazzi. Flashbulbs erupted like lightning storms every time I moved near a window. I was a prisoner in my own luxury. The fallout was immediate. My phone lit up with emails from 2 private galleries I had consulted for. They were terminating our agreements. We cannot be associated with this kind of drama. Ms. Thorne. One message read, "We wish you the best with your recovery." I did not scream. I did not cry. I sat in the dark, printing every article, every vicious tweet, every lie. I filed them into a folder labeled defamation. They were handing me the ammunition to bury them. Later that afternoon, Marcus sent me a flagged document from the hard drive. I opened the file and felt the blood drain from my face. It was the appraisal document for the fake landscape painting, dated yesterday. At the bottom, in blue ink, was my signature. They forged it, I whispered to the empty room. They actually forged my name. They had sent the fraudulent document to a shadow lender to secure a high-interest bridge loan. This was no longer just a civil dispute, it was a felony. I was about to call the police when Gideon FaceTimed me. His face was pale, his expression grave. "Valerie, listen to me carefully," Gideon said, his voice low and urgent. "My contact at the courthouse just tipped me off. Your parents are not just suing you for theft. They are filing an emergency petition for a conservatorship. What I stammered, gripping the edge of the desk. They are claiming you are mentally incompetent," Gideon explained, speaking rapidly. "They are using the fake addiction story and the doctored medical records to convince a judge that you cannot handle your own affairs. If they win temporary guardianship, Valerie, they get control of everything, including you. They will lock you away in a facility and drain your accounts before you can say a word." I stared at the screen, the cold reality settling in. They did not just want to win. They wanted to erase my existence as a free human being. "Let them try," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and cold fury. "They have no idea what I am bringing to the fight." The process server arrived at my penthouse door at 6 in the morning. He shoved a thick envelope into my hand and walked away without a word. I tore it open, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was a summons for an emergency hearing scheduled for that very afternoon. The petition was for an involuntary conservatorship. I called Gideon immediately. "They have a signed affidavit from a Dr. Hurst," Gideon said over the phone, his voice tight with tension. "He claims he has been treating you for 6 months for acute paranoid delusions and erratic behavior. He states you are a danger to yourself and your finances." "I have never met a Dr. Hurst in my life," I shouted, pacing the length of my living room. "This is insane. Gideon, if they get control over me, they will find the Sovereign Keystone account." Gideon finished the sentence for me. "They will drain the $1.2 billion, and they will lock you in a facility where no one can hear you scream. We have to kill this motion today." We spent the next 5 hours building a defense. I pulled every performance review, every clean bill of health, and every professional accolade I had received in the last decade. But we needed more. I made a risky call to Elias, the head archivist at my parents' auction house. He agreed to meet me in the service alley behind the courthouse. "I cannot testify." "Valerie," Elias said, his eyes darting around nervously. "Your father. He will destroy me. I do not need you to take the stand." "Elias," I said, gripping his arm. "I just need to know how they got Dr. Hurst to sign that paper." "They threatened to expose his gambling debts," Elias whispered, his voice shaking. "I heard your father shouting on the phone," he said. "Sign the paper, or everyone knows you are broke." It was blackmail. The courtroom was suffocatingly small. My parents sat on the other side of the aisle, looking like the picture of grieving aristocracy. My mother, Sylvia, was dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Julian looked solemn, a heavy hand resting protectively on her shoulder. "Your Honor," their lawyer began, his voice dripping with false concern. "Mr. and Mrs. Thorne are devastated. Their daughter has cut off all contact, is living in a hotel she cannot afford, and is exhibiting signs of severe mania. We are simply asking for temporary guardianship to get her the medical help she desperately needs." The judge, a stern woman with graying hair, looked at me with pity. My parents were putting on the performance of their lives. "It seems the parents are acting out of love," the judge said, glancing at the fabricated medical report. "I am inclined to order an immediate 72-hour evaluation at the Thorne-approved facility." Panic rose in my throat like bile. If I went to their facility, I would never come out. "Objection." Gideon stood up, his voice booming. "Your Honor, before you rule, you need to see the reality of this so-called love. We have security footage from the night Ms. Thorne ran away, as they claim." Gideon plugged his tablet into the court display. The video from the security camera above the manor's porch played. The quality was grainy, but the action was undeniable. It showed Julian shoving me violently out the door. It showed my suitcase flying through the air and hitting the wet pavement. It showed the heavy door slamming in my face as I stood shivering in the rain. The courtroom went silent. The pity in the judge's eyes vanished, replaced by confusion. "That does not look like a concerned father trying to help a sick child," Gideon said. "That looks like an eviction." She was hysterical, Julian shouted, standing up. We had to contain the situation. "Sit down, Mr. Thorne," the judge snapped. I stood up, ignoring Gideon's hand on my arm. I needed to speak. "Your Honor, I am not manic," I said, my voice steady and clear. "I am a 32-year-old woman who refused to participate in my parents' fraud. They faked that medical report because they know I have evidence of their crimes. This is not about my health. It is about silencing a witness." The judge looked from me to my parents. Her brow furrowed. The video had planted a seed of doubt. "I am not granting the conservatorship today," the judge ruled, slamming her gavel. "However, given the gravity of the accusations on both sides, I am ordering a 48-hour continuance. I want independent medical evaluations. Until then, all disputed assets and accounts linked to the Thorne family are frozen." My heart skipped a beat. The disputed assets were the ones my parents knew about. The Sovereign Keystone Trust was not linked to the Thorne family name. It was safe. "You have 48 hours. Ms. Thorne," the judge said, looking directly at me. "Use them wisely." I looked back at my parents. Sylvia had stopped crying. Her eyes were dry and venomous. They knew they had missed their kill shot. And now, they were the ones in the crosshairs. The judge's ruling had not just bought me time. It had signed my parents' death warrant with their creditors. The shadow lenders holding the debt on the Thorne Heritage Building did not care about family squabbles or court delays. They cared about their money. Desperation makes people stupid, and my parents were terrified. They knew they could not wait 48 hours. They needed liquid assets immediately to pay off the interest, or they would lose their knees, quite literally. I was sitting in my war room when the notification flashed across my secure terminal. It was a silent alarm from the Sovereign Keystone Trust. "Security alert, unauthorized physical access attempt. Sector 4. Key ID Thorne Auxiliary, 1998. "They found the spare key," I whispered, watching the red dot blink on the screen. Julian had found the old iron key in Grandpa's study, the one that used to open the viewing room, not the vault itself. He was delusional enough to believe that a piece of brass could override a modern biometric system. Or perhaps he thought the sheer force of his entitlement would make the tumblers click. My phone rang. It was Mr. Vance. "Valerie, your parents are in the lobby," Mr. Vance said, his voice low. "They are demanding access to the family vault. They are shouting about stolen property. Are they alone?" I asked. "No," Mr. Vance replied, sounding disgusted. "They brought the police and the press. There are 3 news vans outside. Your father is telling the cameras that you are inside right now, looting the family fortune. He is trying to force us to open the doors by creating a public standoff." A cold smile spread across my face. It was almost impressive how predictable they were. They were trying to use the court of public opinion to bypass the bank's security protocols. They wanted a spectacle. I would give them one. "Mr. Vance, listen to me," I said calmly. "Do not turn them away. Do not call security to remove them. Let them into the viewing area. Let the police and the cameras go with them. But, Valerie, that is highly irregular." "Mr. Vance stammered. "If they see the vault is empty—" "Exactly." I cut him off. "Let them see it. I want the cameras rolling when that door opens. I am coming down." I hung up and dialed a number Gideon had given me. It was a direct line to the local FBI field office, specifically the Financial Crimes Division. "Agent Miller speaking." A gruff voice answered. "This is Valerie Thorne," I said. I am sending you a secure file containing 20 years of evidence regarding money laundering and fraud orchestrated by Julian and Sylvia Thorne. You will find wire transfers to shell companies, falsified auction records, and tax evasion documents. I paused, watching the news feed on my monitor. I could see my father on the screen, looking frantic and sweaty, pointing a finger at the bank's stone facade. Also, I added, the suspects are currently attempting to break into a federal banking institution under the guise of a civil dispute. If you want to catch them in the act, you should send a team to Sovereign Keystone Trust immediately. We are on our way, Agent Miller said. I stood up and walked to the mirror. I did not look like the scared girl in the rain anymore. I put on a tailored navy blazer with sharp shoulders and a pair of matching trousers. I pinned my hair back tight. I looked like a CEO. I looked like the executioner my grandfather intended me to be. I walked to the elevator, flanked by the 2 private security guards I had hired. The car was waiting downstairs. Take me to the bank, I told the driver, and do not stop for the reporters. I checked my phone one last time. The trap was set. My parents were standing on the trap door, screaming for everyone to look at them, completely unaware that I was about to pull the lever. You wanted a show? Father, I whispered to the reflection in the window as the car sped through the city. So let's give them a finale. The scene outside the Sovereign Keystone Trust looked less like a banking district and more like a riot. Police cruisers blocked the street, their lights flashing rhythmically against the gray stone of the building. A swarm of reporters pushed against the barricades, microphones extended like hungry beaks. In the center of the chaos stood my parents. Julian was red-faced, screaming at a stone-faced police sergeant, while Sylvia wept theatrically for the cameras, clutching her pearls as if they were the only things holding her together. She is inside looting the family heritage, Julian bellowed, his voice cracking with manufactured outrage. The bank is conspiring with a mentally unstable thief. I demand entry. I have the master key. I watched them for a moment from the tinted window of the sedan. They looked pathetic, desperate. I signaled my security detail. Let's go, I said. My bodyguards opened the car door. As my foot touched the pavement, the atmosphere shifted. I buttoned my blazer, lifted my chin, and walked toward the chaos. The reporter saw me first. A hush rippled through the crowd, followed by an explosion of camera shutters. Ms. Thorne, is it true you stole the collection, Valerie? Your parents say you are on drugs? I ignored them all, walking with a steady, rhythmic cadence that cut through the noise. My parents stopped their performance when they saw me. Julian froze, his mouth hanging open. He expected a terrified girl in a hoodie. Instead, he was looking at a woman who wore her trauma-like armor. Valerie Sylvia shrieked, her voice shrill. Oh, thank God, just give us the key, darling, and we can stop this madness. There is no madness here. Mother, I said, my voice cool and amplified by the silence of the crowd. Only the truth. I turned to Mr. Vance, who was standing anxiously by the glass doors. Mr. Vance, I said loudly enough for the press to hear, please allow my parents access to the Thorne family vault, but under one condition, the police and the press come with us. If I am a thief, let the world see the evidence. Julian's eyes narrowed. He thought I was bluffing. He thought I was cornered. Fine, Julian spat, brandishing the heavy iron key he had taken from Grandpa's study. Bring the cameras. I want everyone to see what you have done. The procession was surreal. We marched through the marble lobby and into the secure elevator. Me, my parents, 3 police officers, and a cameraman from the lead network. We descended into the earth, the air growing cooler and stiller with every foot. When the elevator doors opened, we were in the high-security sublevel. Walls of reinforced steel lined the corridor. We stopped before a massive circular door labeled Thorne Family, Vault 77. Open it, I said, stepping aside. Julian stepped forward, his hands trembling with greed and adrenaline. He jammed the old key into the lock mechanism. It was a ceremonial lock, a redundancy to the digital keypad, but Grandpa had kept it functional for sentimental reasons. Julian turned it. The heavy tumblers clicked. With a groan of hydraulic pressure, the massive steel door swung outward. "Now, let's see where you hid the money," Julian shouted, rushing inside. He stopped dead. The vault was a room of white marble and steel shelves, and it was completely, utterly empty. There were no stacks of cash, no gold bars, no paintings. The shelves were bare, gathering dust. In the center of the room, on a small marble pedestal, sat a single object, a red envelope. The silence was deafening. The only sound was the whir of the news camera zooming in. "No," Julian whispered, his face draining of color. He spun around, his eyes wild. "Where is it? You moved it. You emptied it before we got here. Arrest her." She stole everything. Sylvia collapsed against the wall, sliding down in genuine horror. "It is gone. It is all gone." I walked into the vault slowly, the click of my heels echoing off the empty metal walls. I picked up the red envelope. It was sealed with Grandpa's wax crest. "I did not steal a penny, Julian," I said, dropping the title of father, because there was nothing here to steal. "This vault has been empty for 20 years. "Liar," he screamed, lunging at me, but a police officer held him back. Arthur was a billionaire. "Where is the money?" I held up the red envelope. "The assets are not lost," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "They just never belonged to you. This is Grandpa's judgment." I broke the wax seal on the red envelope with a snap that echoed like a pistol crack in the silent vault. The cameras zoomed in, their lenses hungry for the revelation. I pulled out a single yellowed legal document and held it up to the light. It was not a stash map or a bond certificate. It was a deed of trust, dated 10 years ago. "This," I announced, my voice steady and cold, "is the founding document of the Legacy Prime Trust. It designates me, Valerie Thorne, as the sole beneficiary of Arthur Thorne's entire estate. Every stock, every property, and every liquid asset was transferred to this trust a decade ago." Julian stepped back, hitting the metal shelving. That is impossible. I saw his will. He left everything to me. You saw the will you forged. "Father," I said, and the word felt like a stone in my mouth. I pulled a second sheet from the envelope. "Grandpa knew. He knew you hired a disbarred lawyer to alter his testament while he was in surgery. He did not confront you because he was dying and he wanted peace. Instead, he simply moved the money where you could never touch it." I turned to the cameras. "And speaking of forgeries, I have more." I signaled to Mr. Vance, who handed me the file from our investigation. I held up the high-resolution scans of the loan documents my parents had signed just yesterday. "These are loan applications submitted by Julian and Sylvia Thorne to secure emergency funding from illicit lenders," I explained, pointing to the bottom of the page. "And this is my signature, authorizing the use of a fake painting as collateral, a signature I never wrote." The reporters gasped. The flashbulbs erupted in a blinding strobe. Julian's face turned the color of wet ash. He clawed at his collar, struggling to breathe. You, ungrateful." He wheezed. "We did it to save the company. The company is your legacy too." "Not anymore," I replied. "I did some shopping this morning, using a shell corporation named Valkyrie Holdings. I purchased the distressed debt of Thorne Auction House and the mortgage on Thorne Manor." I took a step closer to them. They looked small now, stripped of their lies. "I am exercising my rights as your primary creditor," I said. "I am calling in the full value of the loans immediately. Since you cannot pay, I am seizing the company. I am seizing the manor. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises." Sylvia let out a strangled sob and fell to her knees on the cold marble floor. She reached out, grabbing the hem of my trousers with desperate, manicured fingers. "Valerie, no, you cannot do this," she wailed, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. "We are your parents. We raised you. Please, have mercy. We are family." I looked down at her. I felt a flicker of the old pain, the little girl who just wanted her mother to love her, but I extinguished it instantly. I remembered the freezing rain. I remembered the locked door. "Family," I repeated, my voice devoid of emotion. "When I stood on your doorstep with nothing, you told me I was a bad investment. You said I was a liability." I leaned down, bringing my face close to hers so the cameras would catch every word. "This is not a family matter." "Sylvia," I whispered. "This is just business." I stood up and nodded to Mr. Vance. "Show them." Mr. Vance typed a command into the wall panel. A large monitor embedded in the steel wall flickered to life. It displayed the live balance of my Legacy Prime account. The numbers glowed neon blue in the dim vault. $1,242,600,000. The silence that followed was total. Julian stared at the screen, his eyes bulging. He had destroyed his soul for millions, while I held billions. "I did not need to steal from this empty room," I said, smoothing my blazer. "I already had everything." Before they could speak, a new sound cut through the air. From the street level far above, the distinct wailing siren of federal vehicles grew louder. The heavy thud of boots running toward the elevator shaft echoed down the corridor. "And that," I said, checking my watch, "is the FBI?" The elevator doors slid open with a heavy metallic groan, revealing a wall of Navy windbreakers emblazoned with yellow letters. Agents poured into the vault, weapons low but ready, encircling Julian and Sylvia with a precision that allowed no escape. "Julian Thorne, Sylvia Thorne," the lead agent announced, his voice bouncing off the steel walls. "You are under arrest for federal wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit forgery." Julian scrambled back, tripping over his own expensive Italian shoes. He pressed his back against the cold metal shelving, pointing a shaking finger at my mother, his face a mask of absolute terror. "It was her," Julian screamed, sweat dripping down his forehead. I told her not to do it. She forged the documents. She ran the accounts. I am just the face of the company. You cannot arrest me. I am a victim here." My mother stared at him, her mouth agape. The betrayal was absolute. As the agent slapped the cuffs on her wrists, she did not look at her husband. She looked at me. Her eyes were wide, filled with a hatred so pure it felt like heat. "You did this," Sylvia shrieked, struggling against the agent's grip as they pulled her toward the elevator. "We gave you everything. You ungrateful, wretched child. You will rot in hell for this. Valerie, you are no daughter of mine." I stood perfectly still, my hands clasped behind my back. I watched as they were marched away, their protests fading as the heavy steel doors closed behind them. I waited for the guilt to hit me. I waited for the sadness to buckle my knees. But there was nothing. Just a vast, quiet relief. The heavy coat of obligation, fear, and manipulation I had worn for 32 years had finally slipped off my shoulders. The reporters were ushered out by the police, leaving the vault in a sudden, ringing silence. It was just me, Mr. Vance, and Gideon. Mr. Vance walked over to the small pedestal where the red envelope had rested. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside lay a heavy, ornate gold key. The silver card was the test, Mr. Vance said softly, placing the key in my palm. "This is the reality. The trust is fully unlocked. The assets are yours to command, Valerie. We have a lot of work to do, Gideon said, closing his briefcase with a satisfied snap. The seizure of the auction house will be messy. The press will be relentless for a few weeks. Let them be, I said, curling my fingers around the warm gold metal. We have nothing to hide anymore. I walked out of the vault and took the elevator back up to the surface. When I pushed through the heavy brass doors of the bank, I stopped. The storm that had raged for days had finally broken. The clouds were parting, revealing a piercing blue sky over Seattle. The air smelled of rain on pavement and ozone. It smelled clean. I looked up at the patch of blue and whispered into the wind, "Thank you, Grandpa." He had not just left me money. He had given me a sledgehammer to break the chains. I pulled out my phone. It was time to build something new. I dialed Sarah's number. She answered on the first ring. "Pack your bags. Sarah," I said, smiling for the first time in days. "And call Marcus and Elias. I am reopening the gallery, but this time, we do it right. No fakes, no laundering, just art. We are with you. Valerie," she replied, all the way. I walked to the waiting car. The driver opened the door, looking at me with new respect. "Where to, Ms. Thorne?" he asked. I paused. The name Thorne used to mean fear and fraud. Now, it would mean whatever I wanted it to mean. "Take me to the warehouse district," I said, sliding into the leather seat. "There is a small studio space on 4th Street. I think it is time I finally bought it." The car pulled away from the curb, merging into the traffic. I did not look back at the bank. I did not look back at the courthouse where my parents were being booked. I looked forward, through the windshield, at the open road. My life was finally my own. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment below, sharing your location and your thoughts on Valerie's journey. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, hit the like button, and smash that hype button to help this story reach even more people.